Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had a good break and met some other folks around the room and took care of whatever business you need to take care of. A couple quick notes before we get back into the Q&A session and the responses to the previously submitted questions. First of all, there is an attendee list out there. You will notice that the attendee list does not actually contain any contact info, which is a little problematic, but we will post a revised version with contact info so you will know how to reach everyone else, both on the procurement webpage for the CFPB as well as on the CVent conference event page. So look for that later today or tomorrow. Is it? Yeah, tomorrow. Also, when we get to the Q&A in the room here, again, we do have the little note cards where you can jot down either procurement-related questions or program-related questions and just kind of wave them if you have one, and one of the staff for the Bureau will come around to grab them. We will also have 2 handheld mics, so if you have a question that has not been addressed through this next session, the previously submitted question section, just raise your hand and one of the Bureau staff will come over with a mic. You don't have to get up and stand in a queue or anything like that. But with that, I think we will now return to the agenda. The next session is on the response to submitted questions. The 3 folks who will be responding to the questions, Nick Olson, who you heard from already, will be responding to the kind of procurement-related questions that were submitted. And then we also have 2 of our staff in CEE, Pam McClelland and Sarah Bainton-Kahn, who will be addressing the programmatic questions for the transitioning veterans and the low-income and other economically vulnerable consumers portions, respectively. So a quick intro for Pam and Sarah. Pam is our Chief Financial Educator in the Office of Service Member Affairs. She'll serve as the POC for the veteran portion of the project. She is an accredited financial counselor and Air Force veteran who served on active duty for over 20 years. Pam joined us from the Pentagon, where she worked for the Office of the Secretary of Defense, leading service member and family support efforts in the areas of wounded warrior recovery and personal financial management. Sarah Bainton-Kahn is a policy analyst with the CFPB's Office of Financial Empowerment. She has been with the Bureau since February of last year and will be one of the project managers on the financial coaching project. Prior to joining the Bureau, she was the program manager for family financial stability at Goodwill Industries International. And prior to that, she was a senior associate for family economic success at the National League of Cities Institute for Youth Education and Families. So with that, I will turn it over to Nick, Sarah, and Pam.
Thanks, Per. Oh, got a little feedback there. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. All right. There aren't too many procurement-related questions, so I'm going to go through those first and then hand it over to Sarah and Pam, and they can go through as many as possible from the program side. We got a lot of questions that were similar in nature, so we kind of grouped them into topic areas, I guess you could say. So the first topic area that I wanted to discuss is the types of vendors and the small business status and whether or not this would be a small business set-aside, things of that nature. So to reiterate what I said earlier, I believe there's no limit on the types of vendors that may choose to submit a proposal here. It's full and open competition, open to anyone and everyone. The corollary there is that this is not a small business set aside. Based on our market research, this will not lend itself to a small business set aside. But although there's no set aside for small business, there are goals, and we encourage maximum small business participation. The goals and sub-goals for each type of small business, whether it may be general small business, 8A, hub zone, woman-owned, service-disabled veteran, or veteran-owned small business, are to be determined. We want to set aggressive yet realistic goals for these, and you will see more on that in the final solicitation. The next topic that I wanted to address, and again, if you have questions here, that's coming up in the live mic session here, so feel free to save those till then. The type of contract award, I mentioned the indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, and here I just wanted to flag for folks who really want to get into things and aren't familiar with procurement that's governed under Federal Acquisition Regulation subpart 16.5. So if you really have some free time later this afternoon, or maybe on Labor Day, I don't know, FAR 16.5 is what you're looking for there. We received quite a few questions about whether this would lend itself to a grant, a NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability, or similar cooperative agreement mechanism. We are doing this as a procurement. It will be awarded as a contract, and all the areas of work that will be required under the contract, as various others have said today, will be part of the statement of work, and we will expect those services to be provided under a contractual relationship. A related note there is in terms of pricing out your proposal, this might be getting ahead of the game a bit because we haven't sent anything out in terms of what our price model might be for evaluation purposes for the award stage. But we did receive a few questions about, will travel and other direct costs be mandated upon us? Like, will CFPB say X $1,000 for travel and force that upon you as part of our price model for the evaluation? Or, are you to propose that yourself? We currently anticipate that you will be proposing that yourself because things vary based on vendor, geography, et cetera. We will set forth a price model that is fair and applicable across the board, but those costs are to be proposed by the vendor because things may vary. We received a few questions about security clearance for vendors. Right now, I guess the best I can give you is that vendors will have to pass at least some level of background investigation. The specific level, whether it's a minimum background investigation or MBI or other things related to that, is to be determined, but it will be in the final solicitation. And another programmatic related question, and then I'll pass it off to Sarah and Pam, is the concept of personally identifiable information and records management. Again, we will provide language and clauses to cover these topics at the time of the final solicitation. Again, if you're interested in reading and getting some more background information, I can promise that one of the things that you'll at least have to comply by is the Privacy Act of 1974. That's kind of the baseline for personally identifiable information. And then records management will provide more information and terms and conditions on what we expect from you at the solicitation phase. So thanks again for the substantive questions. I'll be open to hear any more in a bit here, but I'll hand it off to Sarah and Pam for now.
Great. Thanks, Nick.
Okay, I'm going to start out. As Nick said, some of the questions were easily grouped together. So rather than read each question and be a little redundant, what we did was we grouped them, and then we're going to give you answers to the category, if you will. But first, since this is being videoed, I wanted to have a disclaimer myself. I understand video cameras add weight onto people, so I am 10 pounds less, those of you seeing this, than I look on this film. And I wanted that noted. Okay, now that's done. So the first question I wanted to talk about, the area was on program staffing. And there were questions about certification, professional development, existing curriculum, would we have that, those kind of things. So what I want to tell you is we're very interested in standardization of quality in the coaches. That's one reason why we mentioned certification, and we're going to require certification in the counseling area. And some people are curious, why would you do that if this is a coaching project? Well, financial coaching calls for a depth of subject matter expertise versus life coaching versus executive coaching. It's very important. So we wanted to make sure that we had people that had a certification that had the type of rigor. We mentioned the AFC in our draft solicitation. We know that that certification comes with testing, an ethics module, there is a practicum, there is a CEU component. And more importantly, for the veteran side, that is the standard that's used on the Department of Defense Personal Financial Management Program. So we want to make sure that our veterans that were active duty yesterday are getting the same kind of standard. And as far as Sarah's 20 economically vulnerable, that level of expertise is just as important on that side. So that was one reason we went and suggested that, well, we're going to require that there is a certification for in the counseling realm. And then there'll be the training given for the coaching component, which the contractor will be responsible for. So we level set that coaching training as well. And in future questions, we'll talk a little bit more about that also. The professional development, we really expect that to be provided by the contractor as well, because it's really important in this space, in financial space, that you keep current with what's happening, especially in the veteran side. Well, not especially, but on the veteran side, there are changes in benefits and those kind of things. And also, you need to make sure that there's peer-to-peer development provided in this kind of work is very, very important. And those of you in the space know that that's critical for the counselors and coaches to be able to collaborate.
Yeah, and this is Sarah. I'll just add to what Pam started to say. So we knew that we needed 3 criteria for coaches. We knew that they needed to be trained in the coaching model, that they needed to have a level of financial content knowledge, and also experience working with the respective populations. And there's no certification that brings all 3 of those readily. So this is why we kind of chose this hybrid approach of requiring a certification that would give us a coach who had experience with the populations, but also the financial content knowledge, and then we're overlaying the coaching training on top of that to ensure that they have training in the approach, in the coaching approach. And also we do want consistency across sites, so that's why it's important that we have, a certification that's the same, and then we add a similar coaching training on top of that.
Yep, absolutely.
So the next grouping of questions had to do with different types of coaching delivery. So for example, can coaches use telephone delivery or electronic web-based delivery? So at this stage in the project, the priority is on providing access to in-person, face-to-face coaching services, and Cliff alluded to the importance of that on our side, and also that I think it is important on the veteran side as well. However, we do know that that coaches may choose to or need to use other methods for follow-up, or perhaps other methods for clients who can't come to the site in person, who might have those needs. So we're certainly open to that, and we understand that might be necessary.
Absolutely. The next set of questions revolved around site selection, and you've heard a lot about that already. Especially, it's a little bit more clear-cut on the veteran side, because we are going to target veteran centers and DOL America Job Centers that have the Gold Star program, which is a case management program they have for especially recent transitioning veterans. So to be able to roll into those programs where folks are going to get benefit and to get support, benefit information and support already. And many times, the people that are in those centers, they know that there is a financial piece to every issue that everyone has, but now there'll be a tool for them to use to respond to that. So I think that it's going to work really, really well. Now, in the Air Force, we always say flexibility is the key to tactical success. So we're envisioning one coach per site. But there were many questions about, it could be 2, could 1 cover a different, we're going to be open to hearing in the proposals what you think should happen. Sometimes it might make sense to have 2, let's say, military spouse FINRA fellows, which is a really neat program that FINRA and AFCPE and DoD collaborate on, that gives scholarships to military spouses to become AFCs. Wouldn't it be neat if we had 2 of those and they said, we really want a part-time kind of thing, so you had maybe 2 of them. So those are the kind of things, and people go on vacation and they get sick, and so you'll want to tell us your plan for staffing. So although our vision is 1 per site, we will definitely entertain what you send to us. And Sarah, you had a little bit you wanted to mention about the criteria for your selections.
Sure. So on the economically vulnerable side, just wanted to clarify that we'll be providing high-level criteria for the vendors to use when they propose sites, and that will be in the final solicitation. But we do expect to also work with you on that. to have a collaborative process so that we can identify appropriate sites for that. And to kind of get to piggyback on what Pam was saying, we also know, I think generally we were thinking very generally 90 coaches, 90 sites, but we are also open to staffing proposals that the vendors might submit. And I know for example, on our side, it might be a local organization that has several different delivery sites. And it might make the most sense for, based on foot traffic and whatnot, for a coach to be in one location on one day and another location on another day. And that might actually lead to more appropriate staffing if there's more foot traffic, in certain places. And they can accommodate that. So yeah, we're definitely going to leave that open. I do also want to note that the program is intended to build new capacity and enhance or build on existing capacity to provide financial coaching services. It's not meant to replace the delivery of existing financial coaching services.
Which we know won't happen in the vet centers and the AJCs because there is none now. And that's why we know this is a clear need. So some of you asked about, would we think about putting these folks in U.S. territories? To start with, we're going to stick with, for those of you that have a military background, CONUS and OCONUS. CONUS is continental United States, and then, of course, we have Hawaii and Alaska. I just came off an Alaska cruise, so I'm voting for Elmendorf right now. It was beautiful. So those are the kind of things we're going to start with continental U.S. But also, we want to make sure that somebody asked about the MOUs and MOAs, the agreements, the memorandums of understanding and agreements that we will be having with DOL and VA. I am working those now, but they're in the beginning stages, and we're going to ramp that effort up so that we'll be able to have the detailed requirements of who's going to give what to who. Where are they going to sit? Who's going to have the phone? I don't see VA doling out computers. I'm just saying, but I think there'll be other things that will have a clear-cut delineation of who's going to do what to who. So that's going to work out. And we really expect the contractor to be collaborating on these site selections as well, because we're sure that all of you have a lot to bring to the table in that effort also.
The next grouping is related to outcomes and metrics, sort of also tracking systems. We combined all these questions together. So a lot of this was stated in the draft solicitation that we expect the vendor to bring forth a plan for outcome evaluation to identify appropriate measures and systems, and also to identify or recommend an outcome tracking system. And that they be mindful that this new system will be placed in existing delivery sites that probably have their own systems. And I know this is not an easy task, but to the extent possible to try to figure out how to make that as streamlined as possible, and so that it's incorporated into these existing locations. But we expect to provide more guidance in the final solicitation, especially knowing that there was a lot of questions and really helpful feedback on this particular item. So duly noted, and we're gonna work on providing a little bit more guidance before the time of the final solicitation.
That's for sure. And you can tell your questions have been so valuable to us already. Gave us lots of things to think about. So we were looking at target populations.
Oh, Pam, if it's okay, if I can just mention one more thing related to the outcome tracking, that we do anticipate at this point that there would be common measures across all 90 sites, but we do know that the sites might be very different on the vet side versus the low-income side, and so there's flexibility in terms of maybe we'll have some common measures and then we'll build on depending on the site, and also building on what the site might already be collecting. So that will be important, and it's also important to note in coaching, I think there's a lot of the goals are driven by the client, and so you don't have kind of cookie cutter things that you're collecting for all clients. So it makes it a little bit more challenging, but we're going to figure that out.
Right, and we've been doing some market research and learning all kinds of smart ways that you can measure things that I hadn't really thought about before. So, and it's not as hard a lift, perhaps. So we look forward to having your proposals and seeing what you think. So one of the questions was estimated target population. You've already seen numbers today. Those are ballparks. So we may find out, that we're getting a lot of traffic in one site, especially as the word starts to get out. Our DoD partners are going to market this program for us during their transition assistance program, their new GPS. So we're excited about that. And where Sarah's folks are going to be, there's also going to be a referral and a marketing component that we hope to see expand, so that's going to be really great. So we're going to look at where the population density is, but on the veteran side, there's still a need out in the middle of North Dakota, so we need to consider that as well.
Yeah, and some people asked where the estimates came from. It was, these are estimates. We don't know the sites, so it is kind of difficult to estimate, which you're probably thinking as well. So we will have probably a better idea once we select the sites and understand, again, the volume of clients that that site sees. But at this point, we knew we needed to provide you with something to go on. So, so this reflects our rough estimates in terms of thinking about 90 coaches and their availability, a general understanding of, you know, the number of coaches a number of clients rather that existing programs might see, and we kind of put that together, and this is kind of, you know, the rough estimate.
So the next set of questions revolved around program implementation. We've talked a lot about integration and the goal of integrating where people are already getting services, which is kind of a model that's used in DoD family centers all the time, because somebody walks in with, you know, they have an issue for relocation or an issue with transition, or they have an issue with a life skill. There's always a financial counterpart, or some kind of thread through there that involves money. So we're hoping that all of the other service providers in these locations are going to nicely roll into having this other person that's going to bring this level of expertise. So we're real excited about that. Someone asked a question about on-site management. We don't have that in the draft solicitation, nor will we be putting that in, but if you felt in your proposal that that's the way that you want to operationalize this project, then of course we welcome hearing about it, but we're not requiring that. So, Sarah, you want to talk about the coaching sessions?
Sure. So there was a number of questions about the proposed number of sessions for coaching and how much we were kind of dictating length and number of sessions, what should be included in those sessions. So again, we needed to give you something to start with to give you a sense of what we were aiming for, and 4 sessions was an average of what we've seen across both coaching and counseling programs. And so it gives you a sense that we're trying to focus on a longer term than just maybe a one-off, but that there will be clients that come in and just meet with a coach once. So it's an average, it's an estimate. I think the sessions in terms of how many will really be dependent on the client and the coach and what they determine is appropriate. Also, in terms of the actual length of the sessions, we're thinking an hour. I'm sure, you know, there's some flexibility there too, depending on, you know, the coach's schedule and the needs of the client at that point. I think that might cover.
Great. And then we had more questions about approaches and techniques. We will expect the contractors, coaches to be using best practices and current standards for coaching in the industry. This is not a place where we're expecting people to test techniques. We want to make sure that it's, you know, there's some rigor to what the approach is going to be and that they are tried and true processes that have been used up to date. So, and they also asked if we were going to have resources. We are not at the CFPB going to supply resources other than our amazing resources we already have on our website, like Ask CFPB. Of course, is available to anyone, but we really hope that these coaches will help and empower their client through the use of knowledge about Ask CFPB and the complaint system. But for the veterans, they're going to be coming out of the Transition Assistance Program with lots of tools also. And in this coaching training that's being supplied, there will probably be tools that come to the coaches through that as well. So those are the kind of things that we would anticipate. And someone asked if there was going to be a predetermined set of activities that we were going to expect in these sessions. Absolutely not. That totally goes against what coaching is about. Coaching is about what they need, not what we want them to need. And that's, I think, the beauty of this. So we will be looking across, you know, to things to measure across the board, of course, but it's going to be all about what that person came in to do. especially on the veteran side. They may be coming in just to do, a cost of living analysis between Utah and South Carolina to figure out which job they want to accept. So those kind of things. So I think having tools availed will be important, but we will not be giving like a toolkit, if that makes sense.
And there was one question in that grouping about percentage of time spent on coaching versus, I don't know if it was other activities in terms of the management of the project or activities for the coaches. I'm not fully sure what the question meant to ask, but we do expect that coaching is the primary activity of this project.
Yes, absolutely.
The next set of questions was about phase-in, sort of pilot testing, ramp-up period. A project this size would certainly need a ramp-up period, and I think that hopefully that's reflected in the draft solicitation too. But while there will be a ramp-up period, we're not setting that. That really depends on your proposals. We do hope that it will be as expedient as possible, so that without sacrificing quality, of course, so that we can get coaches on the street as fast as possible.
Then we had a lot of questions about what's the difference between counseling and coaching. So I've done years and years and years of counseling and lots of coaching, because in the DoD space, counseling's not usually just used for in a crisis situation. So there are a lot of counselors that already think they're coaches, but that's why we want to make sure they go through the training so they know those coaching techniques. Because in a financial coaching setting or session, there are times when you need to have that subject matter that you've learned as a counselor through your certifications, but your technique and knowing when to incorporate the nuances of going back and forth is really where the success comes from this project. That's, once again, why we want the certificate for the expertise, but then we'll want standard across the board coaching techniques, so everybody's using the same kind of things and is aware of how they should be doing that. So I think that's going to be exciting. Coaching is strength-based. Empowering, sometimes I don't like that word because we empower the wrong people. I always say, don't empower me, I'm clueless right now. Don't give me the power, I can't, I don't want it now. So we need to make sure that both the techniques are incorporated, and it's more of so what do you need to reach your goal, rather than I'm gonna tell you what you're gonna do. So that's kind of the difference. I hope that clarifies a little of that. Mm-hmm.
And I think you covered that well, and also we expect to hire counselors that will be trained in coaching, and we expect that they would, as someone said, this doesn't replace the need for counseling, and if someone comes in crisis, they're not going to be turned away, and that coach would draw from their counseling experiences, and perhaps that person who needs that one-off help can transition into a really good coaching client, because maybe now that they've gotten through one key crisis, then they can focus on some longer term stuff. So we do expect that the coaches would draw from their expertise and their backgrounds in the counseling.
Absolutely. And then there was, once again, lots of questions on the facilities, what's going to be included, what would the contractor have to supply, and we'll be getting more into the details of that as I work the MOUs and MOAs, and Sarah's going to be doing the same thing on her side as well.
There were some questions about marketing, outreach, whether or not CFPB was going to have a role in this, or expect the vendors to be providing plans for this. So a couple of things to note: the coaches will be placed and embedded in existing organizations that already have their own mechanisms to draw traffic, which is one of the benefits of doing it in this manner. However, that said, the contractor and its partners, subcontractors, may choose to conduct, some kind of outreach and communication plan for this new, extra service that the organizations have, and that should be included as part of your plans if you would like to include it. I guess I would envision that would build on the existing work that organization is already doing and be appropriate to what the organization sort of needs and how they currently do their outreach and marketing.
Absolutely. So then we had a question more about staffing requirements, and a lot of them were directed to the veterans, saying, are you going to require these coaches to be vets? As Holly said, in the military, if you're not familiar with us, we speak a different language. And when you're looking for information, you don't need to have to translate what you're saying. And also, it totally alienates a veteran when they walk into a place and they're not even referred to correctly, or they don't have the right terms, or people don't understand them. So do they have to be vets? No. Do they have to know that space? Yes. Could they be a military spouse? Sure. Could they be somebody that worked as a federal employee with military for years? Sure. I mentioned that wonderful group of military spouses that have those FINRA scholarships. What a wonderful way to employ our military spouses in this effort. They would be so valuable. So that, yes, absolutely, we're going to look for people that have extensive experience in the military space on our side. That is going to be a requirement.
The next group is about program staffing, and I think we covered a little bit of this, questions about full-time versus part-time, locations, that sort of thing. And basically, yes, we were thinking sort of 90 coaches for 90 sites, but we're open to staffing plans as the vendor proposes that may be most appropriate. So we are open to some part-time, and a coach may be having more than one delivery site in a certain location. So there was another specific question about whether or not coaches they would be contracted, so they would be technically contractors, whether or not they could have other work also. And I think, the vendor would have to, it's really up to you to propose an appropriate staffing and think about resources. And the thing that we would just ask you to be mindful of is that that it wouldn't propose some kind of conflict of interest for the organization or the individual if that person does have some other work that they're going to be doing.
And then we had some talk about, or questions about the coaching training. And once again, we're going to really need that to be something that's been established and proven, and that it has experience behind it, and that the training is being performed by the right folks, the experts in the field and in the industry, because that's going to be so crucial. This coaching training that's going to set the stage for the standard and the quality of the performance across the board. So we don't want it to be folks that think they know how to train on coaches, or that haven't done it before but think this is a good time to start. We'd be looking for something with a little more depth and some rigor and some past to it.
And that would include both ensuring that the technique is getting taught, but also that the coaches would have resources that they would need to do their jobs well. So be it that they have to, practice, or that they have some job aids with them, or that they have continuing education opportunities, or even peer networking opportunities. We leave that to you to decide, but these are some things that we've been kind of, reading about and looking into that seem like some promising things.
And also making sure that you have somebody with that kind of experience that's doing the oversight, that's making sure that, the training took, and across time, things are being done the way that we envision them as well.
5 minutes is fair.
Okay, so we continue to be ahead of schedule, which is great. We are now going to move to the in-the-room questions. We will have 2 mics circulating. Again, a reminder, if you have jotted down a question on one of the cards, please just hold it up and wave it around, and one of our folks will come by and grab it. We do encourage you to focus on questions that have not otherwise been answered through the the responses to the submitted questions section here. Oh, wait, do this again. There we go. We will keep this portion to the in-the-room piece, and then we will open the phone lines just so that we're not going back and forth and feedback and whatnot. And we have our 3 resident experts up here to answer all of your questions. So with that, if you have a question, just raise your hand. Someone will come around with a mic. If you have a card, again, just wave it, and someone will come by and grab that. Point. If you are going to ask a question, please identify yourself and your organization before beginning, just so everyone kind of knows where questions are coming from. Thank you.
Ron McKnight, Genesis Financial Management, Tampa, Florida. The question is, will there be, well, first of all, it's really a 2-part question. To start, is there a universal database right now where there's veteran information being stored? And then part 2 of that question is, will there be any type of connectivity that would be allowed to the vendor to be able to connect to those databases?
I can take that one.
You can take it. I don't know if there's a
Yeah.
database.
No, as far as the first part, that we would have access to. You know, I'm sure VA's got tons of stuff. Now, I don't think that we'd be plugging into that, but as we work through the MOU and MOA with VA and DOL, they may suggest that certain parts that we integrate in. DOL has a case management process for young veterans where they track them for 3 or 4 years. There's been some mention that this would be able to roll into that. So we will be working on more specifics with those organizations to see if that's going to make sense, but we would also hope that there would, in the proposal, there will be an internal process for tracking and those kind of things that may or may not. I don't know if you've ever tried to plug into a government system. It doesn't work. So we just want to make sure that we integrate where we can or where they suggest, but certainly they would only on a, you know, they would have to offer that up. I hope that helped.
Other questions in the room?
Hi, Brett Theodos from the Urban Institute. Question about evaluation. Are you envisioning, there was mention of a summative evaluation, a random control trial or something to get at programmatic impact coming further down the road. Are you envisioning that the entity doing that would be worked in at the early stages, designing the performance metrics, or that that would be an independent study commissioned by CFPB at some later point?
I can probably take
Sure.
that. At this point, we had to include language in the draft solicitation to say that vendors should be aware that we would like to do a rigorous evaluation. We were envisioning, 2 to 3 years in, so that the program would have a chance to, be established and be implemented. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind, but I do envision it would be a separate kind of contract, a separate, at this stage anyway, a separate evaluation that would kick in further down the line.
Yeah, we definitely are not going to get to that level of evaluation on the project right now, to start with.
Okay, we do have some question cards. I will defer to my colleagues. Want me to read these to you or just give them to you?
I got one.
I haven't seen one for you, though.
Looks like I will be reading them to you. Okay. First, a procurement-related question. Could you provide additional thoughts on office staffing in addition to the coach, so beyond the coaches?
That's probably more of a programmatic question in terms of staffing levels and management approach.
We're open to hearing what you consider to be the management approach, but our goal is that the coaches are all we're looking to have in the locations. We're certainly not going to be contracting for admin support for them, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. At this point, we hadn't considered that at all in the process.
I believe we have another in-the-room question.
Actually, 2 questions. First, my name is Michael Morris, the Director of National Disability Institute, Washington, D.C. First, a question on the veterans side. The demand or need is going to exceed the abilities of even wherever you ultimately determine the 70 locations would be. I wonder if you're considering any prioritization that would, of course, within the veteran population, look at disabled veterans, and particularly both disabled veterans and economic vulnerability as an additional criteria, or are you simply leaving that to the responders in terms of establishing priorities? That would be question 1 on the veteran side. On the economically vulnerable population, a somewhat similar question is that might you provide a little bit more definition, or will you, in the ultimate solicitation, that either helps define the broadness of scope of the economically vulnerable population, and in particular, again, any type of prioritization, because demand will exceed ability to provide the supports and services that takes into impact individuals with disabilities?
I can start with the veteran side. I know, because I worked Wounded Warrior Care and Transition Policy, that there is some financial assistance and coaching already targeting that population. But, as you say, the veteran centers and the DOL AGCs already have people coming in. It's going to be who walks in the door at this point, because we are going to make sure that we are marketing this service to different populations. And of course, WWCTP at DOD will be telling folks about us, as well as the other side of DOD, the Transition Assistance Program. So we won't be prioritizing, but we will hopefully quickly get a sense of what the demand signal is, because I think it's going to be different places, because veterans are not just going to veteran centers, and they're just not going to DOL. So there are a lot of questions in that space, and I think that we'll be able to better assess once we get ramped up. So are we going to particularly target our wounded warriors? Probably not, but boy, we sure, and also our spouses of the fallen. They're also going to be a population that we are going to be very interested in assisting as well. They also have some specific DOD programs that already is doing that. So we hope to act in concert with those things, if that makes sense.
First, a point of clarification, that the Cliff outlined a broad sort of definition of low income and other economically vulnerable, and that is meant to indicate the types of organizations and sites that we're thinking about. There's not going to be a test, are you thin or no credit file? Okay, then you can get coaching services. There's not going to be some kind of test. So that might help in terms of thinking about, you don't have to worry about on the client level. It's more to help indicate what types of organizations we're looking for. And then in terms of process, we will be identifying the selection criteria, and we are definitely, understand and are thinking of that kind of, thinking the types of populations that we might want to target, because we also want a diversity of sites. We want to make sure that the sites are diverse in terms of location and geography, but also the types of clients that they serve.
Just a follow-up to Michael's question, Jim McDonough from Syracuse University. With the emphasis on transition, the implied task within that places a priority on post 9/11 returning veterans. Just a point to clarify, if the real true targeting of the 70 sites is on transition, as the draft solicitation kind of implies, then there is an emphasis, in my mind, placed on post 9/11 veterans and their families. Is that a correct assumption to make?
Absolutely, that is a correct assumption, because we think that's where we can do the best good right away, because of the drawdown and how quickly. Plus, don't forget, back prior to 9/11, we had a lot of time in garrison or in squadron, as I'm a retired NCO, to help our troops build their life skills, including financial. They've been downrange a lot, and so that some of that did not get to happen. So we're hoping that we'll be able to intersect in that space. So absolutely, we hope to do a lot of good work with the 9/11.
We have another in-person question, but before turning that, there's a very related card submitted here on prioritization for the veteran side of the program. Will Vet Center and DOL sites be based on total population of vets or recently separated?
That's a great question. And we're going to work with DOL and VA, because we definitely want to have places that make sense, where the density is, Hampton Roads, San Diego, those kind of places. But we also have a lot of veterans in Middle America that are trying to get some assistance. So we really want to make sure that we're thoughtful and we're smart about where those go. So I think that's going to have a lot to do with our conversations with DOL and VA, because the Vet Center's been doing this for a while. So we want to definitely pull from that expertise.
It's Melody Gravine. I'm with San Diego City College, the military education program there. And my question's a little bit of a follow-on to the 9/11 question. Would you be open to looking at targeting veteran centers that are on campuses in those areas? Because one of the places that we're seeing real issues is with the post 9/11 GI Bill and them being targeted by for-profit universities and those kinds of things. So it would seem like getting into the veteran centers at some of the campuses would be a good place if you're open to that.
From reading the newspaper, my boss, Holly, has done a lot of work in that space, and it's a passion for us. You know, we only have 70, okay? So we're going to be very thoughtful. I don't know if we're going to get to the universities on this run. Who knows if, you know, the future of this project. But that is definitely something that we would like to, you know, keep on our radar, because we know the need is great.
Okay, I'll turn to some more cards until there's more in-person questions. Just a quick, easy one to dispense with. Can you make available a list of the attendees and companies? Yes, we will be posting a revised list on the CVent and the procurement web pages tomorrow that will include contact info for all of your colleagues and peers in the room here. Another procurement-related question. Can you share with us the funding cap for this procurement?
Yeah, no, I can't share that. And the funding, the budget is one thing, but, you know, the concept of your proposed price is a different thing as well. So I alluded to earlier the concept of we'll provide a price model for you to fill out, and the two are related yet different concepts, but we cannot reveal either the budget or our independent government cost estimate or anything of that nature, unfortunately. And while I'm on the mic here, I'll make a general disclaimer that I forgot to make earlier, and that's that if there's any discrepancies between what we say here, what we said earlier, or will say later, and the final solicitation, the final solicitation will govern. That should seem pretty clear, but I want to just state that for the record. Wait for what the wording of the final solicitation says and go with that for sure.
To map up the final solicitation to what Nick in particular has said here at this conference. So, okay, and this, another in-person question?
Yeah, just to follow on to Jim's question.
Mike coming
I think
through.
it's been answered in a couple of different ways. But are you anticipating that the offer will do some demand analytics, and will that data be available, or will you be doing the demand analytics to figure out, I mean, in terms of recruiting and sourcing and being as efficient as we possibly can, some of that data should be available. Oh, so sorry. I'm Risa Friedman, and I'm with Deloitte.
For the veteran side, I'm working that as hard as I can right now with VA and DOL. The more information I get, the more will go into the final solicitation. However, I wouldn't say that I'm going to have a list of where they're going to be in the final solicitation. Now, we're going to do things because of the type of criteria we're putting on the coaches for them to have experience in this space. You know, we're going to be very thoughtful in that way too. You know, perhaps it might make sense to put them around where an active duty installation is, or where there are veterans, for you to be able to, or the contractor to be able to source the right people in. So we're going to do our best.
Okay, I'll take another card submitted question on outcomes. In addition to the number of individuals who meet with coaches, are there other specific outcomes that the initiative hopes to achieve, i.e., everyone will do X or have Y?
So when we release the final solicitation, we expect to provide more information about that, and probably it might include some high-level goals, and then some idea about metrics to include in that. The way we have it kind of worded now in the draft solicitation, though, is that a lot of that kind of thinking is on the vendor side, but we are kind of thinking through a lot, and a lot of it is because based on some comments and questions we've gotten from you, that it might be helpful if we provide a little bit more guidance in that realm. So stay tuned.
We also have to keep in mind what the goal of coaching is. It's not what our goal is for them, it's what their goal is for them. So it kind of gives a little bit of, you don't want to require people to do things, because then you go into a different model.
Again, on the kind of outcome evaluation side, do you anticipate requiring the evaluation to utilize an experimental RCT design, random controlled trial design?
Yeah, covered that a little bit earlier, but basically, we left open the ability to do that 2 to 3 years down after the, program's up and running and has had a chance to work out the kinks. We would, at that point, evaluate internally the inclusion of an RCT evaluation if we deem that it's appropriate at that point in time. It's in the draft solicitation, but in addition to sort of the outcome tracking that we will be requiring, there is a note about having a process evaluation. So that's another component of evaluation that the vendor will need to incorporate to make sure that everything is sort of been implemented well, and that we have an understanding of why in some sites things might have worked well and other sites it didn't work well, and we can use that, really to use that information each year to improve upon the program.
So I have a question I think was actually focused on the veteran side, but I think has some applicability for the low-income economically vulnerable piece as well, at least as to the received public benefits. Will counselors or coaches for vets be actively involved in benefits administration for veterans, or similarly with low-income economically vulnerable? And a follow-on question for the vets piece, will the organization that employs the counselors need to be a VSO?
The Veterans Service Organization is what a VSO is. The vet centers and the DOL centers are government agencies. They're not VSOs. Those are the places we're targeting first.
They wouldn't actually be the employers of the coaches, correct? They would.
Yes, I'm sorry, I get it. The contractor is going to employ the coaches. Right. Not
But there's no requirement that the contractor be a veteran service.
No, and there's no requirement for the contractor to be VSO. Thank you.
Sorry. And so on the first part of the question around benefits administration, should I repeat it?
Could you?
We'll be like a game show. Well, do you want to use your lifeline for that one? Will the counselors, coaches for vets be actively involved in the benefits administration for veterans?
They will work in concert with the folks that are doing the benefits counseling, but if you ever looked into what benefits counseling is, it's huge. To require a coach/counselor to be fully versed in that would be crazy, and we would have a whole different solicitation. So I think when folks come in to see the benefits counselor, then through that exchange with the benefits counselor, they could then discover that it would be a good idea for you to go talk to the financial coach, because they can help you with this aspect of your benefit question.
I'll go ahead and apply that to the low-income and economically vulnerable side. So I would expect that the coaches would be somewhat versed, or would be versed in sort of benefits for low-income families, and that they would figure out a way to either incorporate that into their work if it's appropriate, if that's something that the client identifies as something like increasing income, what have you. Or that they would be referring, that they would have a good understanding of where to refer that client to, so that they could get full benefit screening, full benefit outreach assistance. And hopefully that referral will be, down the hall, but it could also be that they have a kind of a good resource list of places to refer in the community as well.
And that's a benefit of putting them where we are, because those people are great referral folks. So they know where the people are to send them for things they can't handle.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question, I think, is actually kind of a blended procurement program question. Nick, you've been waiting so patiently. We've got one teed up for you. The question is, there's a wide range of delivery options and assumptions that will affect price. For example, travel, training approach, et cetera. Often price and technology approach are separated in the evaluation process. In this case, they are intertwined so closely that separating the two may disadvantage a more thorough responses. How will you control for this?
On the procurement side, I'm not sure what the statement was there, but it sounded to me like, price is so tied to the technical approach that, there could be some confusion there. I think that's the case in any procurement, to be honest, in the sense that what you propose, where you're located, other variables that are beyond our control are going to be part of your technical approach, and then other innovations that are within your control as to how you attack this project are what we're looking for and will also influence the price. So we haven't made a final determination as to the importance of price here. Again, everything will be finalized in the final solicitation, but we are not going to set price as the most important factor, I would imagine, and we will have a trade-off analysis as to your technical approach, the management and staffing, key personnel, and other things that we might include in the evaluation criteria, and the price that is proposed for evaluation purposes in the price model.
Pam or Sarah, did you want to add anything program side?
Just that I think it's important to go back to what the project goal is, that we would have a coach sitting in a location. So that would help, you know, maybe when you're pricing travel. Technology, you know, we're going to expect some way to track things. So I think if you think through the process and what the goal is, maybe that would be helpful.
Another in the room question?
Hi, I'm Becky Smith with the Financial Clinic. I was just curious if you have a vision or how you're actually looking for the sites where coaches are being placed, if there's any training expectations around staff there, or really being able to leverage that person's capacity at the site and the support that's needed for the staff there to really understand how to access that.
Fantastic point. And it's something that, you know, we hope the vendors will include in their technical approach. But Pam started to get at an integration question that these are going to be new staff or coaches placed in existing delivery locations. And in order for the project to be successful, there needs to be organizational buy-in, you know, from the top down, so that the organizations, you know, want to coach in the first place and sort of get what that is. And then you would need staff at the very least to understand, other staff beyond the coach, to understand like what the coach is and what they do and what that value is, so that they can refer clients, because obviously we want to draw from existing foot traffic. And if, you know, someone who's doing job training down the hall doesn't really understand what a financial coach is, they're not going to send their clients down the hall to work with, you know, the financial coach. So that is should be part of your thinking and your technical approach, and how to like be successful in the integration of this person.
And this is very, very important, that the relationship piece is attended to in the proposal to show us how that would happen. I don't know if you've ever been to a vet center, but you know, sometimes it takes a little work to get a new tool or a new person integrated into their team. So we want to make sure that that would happen. They're crusty old retirees like me, so you need to make sure that that kind of happens.
I think we have another in-person question up here.
Are you looking to the contractor possibly to address, let's say, if the demand exceeds the capacity, to address a fallback position, either additional resources or looking at how you would deal with a backlog so that you don't raise expectations that can't be delivered on?
Can you quickly say who you are and where you're from?
Fred Corral with Northport Affiliates.
Thank you.
We're going to have very close contact with the contractors that are doing this, so we will all know what's happening as it happens. And of course, we would look at how to respond. You know, we have resources for this project, so we would make adjustments or look at what the smartest thing to do is as those things start to unfold as a team, to respond to that, I would think. So yes, we will absolutely know from you that this is happening, I hope right away. And then, of course, on my side with our partners, we would start to look at how to adjust to that.
Okay, a couple related card questions around the kind of accreditation standard for counselors. One question was, does housing counseling certification meet the criteria of counselors who would be trained in coaching? And on a kind of a related front, have you considered allowing the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, NFCC, as an alternative to the AFC certification? If yes, what did you conclude?
The credit counseling certification only remains with the person as long as they're in the agency they work for, because I looked into that with the question that came to me. So when you leave there, that agency, I believe that that certification is no longer, it's an agency certification, it's not an individual certification. So I think that causes some issues, if I have that right, if that's the right certification. The housing one, that's a very specific skill set, which may not have the depth and broadness we're looking for as far as subject matter. We would have to look closer at that, but I certainly would prefer someone that has more training and experience in the whole breadth of financial management and education, rather than just the housing. Although they do wonderful work, those people are fantastic, and it's amazing what they do.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, as Pam noted earlier, we were looking for the breadth of the financial content knowledge, rigorous process, testing, practicum for sure, a lot of practice and experience working with the respective populations, things like continuing education credits, but certainly vendors can propose alternative certifications if they have comparable rigor, practicum, depth, and breadth.
Right, and that would have to be plainly shown.
If they did that, we would want the proposal to include an explanation of how it met the criteria that we.
Yes, please.
I think we'll pause for the in-person questions and move to the phone lines. I know we have a number of people who've been waiting patiently. So the operator will queue up questions, and we will hopefully all hear them here in the room. So with that, I'll turn it over to the operator to queue up the first question.
Thank you. We will now begin the question and answer session. If you'd like to ask a question on the phone line, please press star, then 1. Once again, to ask a question on the phone line, please press star, then 1. 1 moment, please, for the first question. We do have a question from Jackie Easter. Your line is open. Jackie, please check your mute button. Your line is open.
I didn't submit a question.
Next question comes from Eugene Brusa. Your line is open.
Thank you. Hi, this is Gene Bruce. I'm the President and CEO for GBX Consultants Incorporated, and we currently provide worldwide services in support of DOL employment workshops and also work with OSD TVPO office. My question relates to placement. There's a lot of very large military installations, Fort Bragg, Camp Pendleton, et cetera, and I was wondering how many of the counselors would be co-located, possibly with larger installations, and also if there would be any OCONUS requirement. Thank you.
We need to do a pause for the sound folks to kind of flip from the phone line back to the answers here. So take it away.
Yeah, I touched a little bit about OCONUS before. Like I said, I'm a fan of Elmendorf and, of course, Hawaii. Who isn't? So, but seriously, we're going to be selecting where the density is and also need. So, yes, of course. I mean, the Camp Pendleton area, my goodness, and Fayetteville's got all kinds of vets from what used to be Pope Air Force Base and now Fort Bragg. So they could very well be selected, absolutely. And people like you through DOL are going to give us all kinds of great information of what's smart to do.
Next question.
Would you like to go on to the next question?
Question, please.
Next question comes from Uriel Spain. Your line is open.
Yeah, hi. This is Uriel Spain with Action United. I'm the financial director there. And my question is regarding the funding and whether or not it can be channeled through a fiscal sponsor.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? You kind of tailed off at the end. Channeled through what?
A fiscal sponsor.
This is Nick from procurement. The short answer there is no, this is a contract. This will be awarded as a contract. Subcontracting agreements and other joint ventures or partnerships that are made at the prime contractor level are a business decision to be made by you and your colleagues and the vendors submitting proposals. But for our purposes, this will be awarded as a contract, and the funding will be contract funding.
Next question, operator.
At this time, we have no further questions on the phone line.
So why don't we turn back to in the room? Are there any final questions from anyone in the room? I think we're through our cards. This isn't speak now or forever hold your peace, because you can actually submit more questions. And we encourage you to do so. But since, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Bear, following on to that. We did notice one typo. Of course, I introduced Matthew earlier. His last name, tough to pronounce, tough to spell, but we actually misspelled his first name in the agenda. So he's Matthew with two T's, and I think there's just one on the agenda. So following on to the concept of submitting other questions by September 4th, please note his name was misspelled there, and you can also submit them to me, nicholas.olson@cfpb.gov.
So we'll wrap things up now. A couple of final logistic points, and I'll turn it over to Nick to describe some next steps. First of all, again, all of the materials for today, including the slides that were presented, will be available on, I think, both the CVent and the procurement pages. So please check them out if you have not gotten them here. There will also be an updated attendee list that will include contact info. As Nick alluded to a couple times, we will do the Q&A that were run through for the submitted responses to submitted questions is already available online. We will do an updated version after the September 4th deadline for submitted questions and comments. That will again be available on the CFPB's procurement website. We do encourage you to solicit any follow-up or kind of additional questions you think of the minute you walk out of the door. There are instructions on your agenda on how to route those questions to Nick in the procurement side, and we'll incorporate them into the final solicitation. Again, a recording of the event will also be made available as a public record. That will be available, I believe, on the procurement page on FedBizOps. Is that okay?
Maybe not FedBizOps.
Okay,
It'll
just the
likely
procurement
be
page.
just the procurement page. The Q&As and the more formal solicitation-related things are FedBizOps.
Okay. So with that, we'll turn it over to Nick, but thank you again for coming to join us today. Thank you for those who dialed in. I know it's a long session to sit through on the phone, but we appreciate your participation. And now Nick will kind of walk us through next steps.
Yeah, I'll keep it short here. I've said before that the best thing to do is to get registered in sam.gov if you haven't already for any procurement in general. So that's the final reminder there, sam.gov as soon as possible, just to prevent any hiccups down the road. Keep an eye on FedBizOps. In the fall, we will be releasing solicitation, and any Q&As between now and then, as soon as possible, will be posted there. And then I just want to take a sec to say one final thank you. You submitted some very substantive and thoughtful comments. It has helped us out a lot. We appreciate your attendance and for everyone calling in on the phone as well. So thanks again, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
Thank you all.